The co-op hall smelled of stale coffee and old wood. Every farmer in the county had squeezed in for the spring contract meeting.
This year's contract includes the new pesticide blend. Everyone signs.
A young woman near the back rose. Sarah Whitfield hadn't spoken all evening. Now she held the unsigned contract in her hand.
I am not signing this.
Charles's head turned. The room went dead quiet. A few older farmers exchanged glances.
You are new here, Missy. But the co-op rules apply to everybody. No signature, no equipment, no suppliers.
I'll farm the way my mother taught me, without chemicals.
A dry laugh broke from the back, then another. Soon half the room was laughing, old men slapping their knees.
You'll be blacklisted. No one in this town will sell you so much as a bolt.
Sarah didn't answer. She walked out of the hall, the sound of laughter still pushing at her back. The next morning, Sarah stood at the edge of her mother's 20 acres, the soil still cold under a gray March sky.
No tractor, no help. Just these hands.
She dragged a hoe through the hard ground, carving rows for cover crop seed. A red-tailed hawk circled above.
That ground won't feed a goat, girl. You need chemicals.
He doesn't know what the soil can still do.
By noon, the supply depot confirmed it. Charles had blacklisted her. No parts, no seed, no credit.
So, it begins.
That evening, in a dusty corner of the shed, she found a cardboard box, labeled Eleanor's Notes.
Everything you knew, Mom, I am going to use.
By the time the first crocus bloomed on the eastern slope, Sarah Whitfield hadn't bought a single gallon of chemical, and the soil was waking up. One afternoon, a dusty pickup stopped at the farm gate. Charles Hartley stepped out, his face set like a man collecting a debt.
You are making a fool of yourself, Whitfield. These organic fairy tales will ruin your land and drag down property values for all of us.
My mother kept the soil alive for decades without your chemicals. I'll do the same.
Your mother never turned a profit. You'll be begging the co-op for help by August.
We'll see who's begging.
2 days later, the cultivator pin snapped. Sarah drove to 3 towns. Every supplier had been warned. She returned empty-handed.
Fine. I'll build what I need.
She welded a replacement from old tractor parts, then returned to the field to plant her beneficial insect strips, yarrow, buckwheat, phacelia. A week later, the first pale green shoots of the cover crop pushed through the soil, a thin but stubborn line across the brown field.
It's working. 1 inch at a time.
June arrived, and Sarah's cover crop stood knee-high, a thick carpet of clover and rye that held the soil like a woven net. Across the fence line, the conventional acres showed pale, thin stands, plants already hungry, their leaves curling in the dry heat.
They poured chemicals on dead soil and expected life.
Then, on a blazing Tuesday, the State Agricultural Bureau interrupted every farm radio broadcast with an emergency bulletin. The pesticide blend Charles Hartley had sold for 30 years was banned, effective immediately, after a health study found groundwater contamination.
A temporary overreaction. The state will reverse this before planting season ends.
But the bulletin's final line froze every farmer in the room. Mandatory soil testing would begin in 30 days.
If they test, they'll see.
They're about to learn what my mother already knew.
Outside his window, Sarah Whitfield's fields were the only green for miles, and the state had just made her methods the only path forward. 2 weeks later, the soil test envelopes arrived in a thick state-stamped bundle. Dale McKittrick tore his open beside his pickup, sat down hard on the running board.
0 organic matter, heavy metals. My grandfather's farm is poison.
Same here. 3% organic matter. My field's a dust bowl.
In Charles Hartley's office, the pesticide catalogs were laid out like a desperate hand of cards. He called every supplier in 100 miles.
There has to be an approved alternative. Something I missed.
Across the county, Sarah Whitfield's soil report told a different story. Microbial biomass 7 times the county average, 0 heavy metals, earthworms wriggling in every sample. The news slipped through truck stops and feed store aisles before the ink was dry.
Heard her dirt's so alive you can hear it. Mine's a graveyard. Mine's a graveyard.
We were wrong. Maybe we ought to go and listen.
Charles felt the ground shifting. He called an emergency board meeting for Friday night. The soil was testifying, and the farmers were finally listening. The following Monday, a white sedan pulled up to Sarah's gate. Linda Marchetti, regional produce buyer for Farm Fresh Grocery, stepped out in a pressed blouse and sensible shoes.
These tomatoes are the size of softballs. I've never seen anything like this without hydroponics.
No synthetic inputs, just compost, cover crops, and beneficial insects. The soil does the work.
The soil. Test Your County published is the talk of my buying circle. I want an exclusive contract. Every tomato you can grow, I'll pay 30% above conventional market.
Exclusive. No co-op. I could run this farm on my own terms.
I've seen the other fields. They're dying. You are the only viable source in this county.
You've got a deal. Let's put it in writing.
As Linda's sedan disappeared down the county road, Sarah looked at the signed contract in her hands. She wasn't just feeding herself anymore. She had just outflanked the co-op completely.
No more begging. No more blacklist. This farm is mine, and now the world knows it.
But Charles Hartley's emergency board meeting was still ahead, and word of Sarah's contract hadn't reached the co-op yet. 2 days later, a panicked co-op bookkeeper called Charles Hartley. Farm Fresh Grocery had registered a new exclusive supplier, Sarah Whitfield.
She can't do this. Her tomatoes are full of bugs. She's a fraud.
Charles dialed Linda Marchetti directly. He used every oily word he knew: contamination risk, unlicensed methods, a young woman in over her head.
I've seen her soil tests, Mr. Hartley. And I've seen yours. The contract stands.
Charles slammed the receiver down, his face pale. The clock on his wall ticked toward the emergency board meeting. He had one card left. An hour later, his pickup rolled to a stop at Sarah's gate. She was waiting, arms crossed, as if she'd known he would come.
You've made your point. Come back to the co-op. Share your methods, and I'll cancel the blacklist. We can save the county together.
You want my methods to save yourself. You blacklisted me, mocked my mother, and poisoned the land. I am not saving you, Charles.
Then you'll regret it. This county has a long memory, and you are burning every bridge.
He drove off, tires spitting gravel. The war between them was now open, and the next move would be in front of the entire co-op board. That same evening, 2 figures appeared at the edge of Sarah's field. Earl Benson and Dale McKittrick, hats in hands, walked slowly up the dirt path.
We're not here for Charles. Our farms are dying, and we don't know what else to do.
Sarah didn't gloat. She simply waved them toward the cover crop. The soil under the rye was dark, crumbly, alive.
This soil's like black gold. You can smell the life in it.
Compost and cover crops. No mystery. Just feeding what was already here.
We were fools to laugh at you. But Charles won't let anyone near you without consequences. He's got the co-op board in his pocket.
I'll help any farmer who's ready to leave the chemicals behind, but I won't be used to prop up Charles's power.
Earl and Dale exchanged a long look. They knew she meant it, and they knew what crossing Charles would cost.
We can't turn on him outright. Not yet, but we'll be watching. And we won't forget what we saw here.
They walked back to their trucks without another word. But the crack in Charles's wall had widened, and Sarah Whitfield wasn't alone anymore. The next morning, Charles Hartley's truck pulled up again, but the hard edge was gone from his face.
Eleanor, your mother. We were friends. She would have wanted the co-op to survive. She'd want you to work with me.
Friends? You mocked her at every meeting. You called her hysterical.
Charles climbed into his truck without looking back. The sadness on his face had been as real as a painted mask. Inside the farmhouse, Sarah stood before her mother's photograph. The expression on Eleanor's face seemed to be asking a question.
His words were poison, but they pulled at something buried.
She reached for her mother's binder, the one she'd read so often she knew every crease. This time, her thumb caught a seam inside the back cover, a hidden pocket she'd never noticed. Inside lay a single envelope, sealed with wax that had cured 20 years ago. Sarah held the letter, still sealed. Something told her that what was inside had been waiting for this exact moment. She broke the seal. The first page was her mother's handwriting, dated 20 years ago. Eleanor Whitfield warned the co-op board that continuous pesticide use was collapsing the soil structure, that within a generation the land would be barren. She proposed a county-wide transition to cover cropping and microbial restoration, offering her own data and planning. The second page was not in her mother's script. It was typed on co-op letterhead, signed by Charles Hartley. The reply read, "Mrs. Whitfield, your hysterical suggestions have no place here. If you cannot cooperate, the board will review your membership." And at the bottom, a handwritten postscript. "Eleanor, stop causing trouble, or you'll be cut off like your fields." Sarah's hands shook. The woman Charles had called a friend had been bullied into silence, her warnings buried.
He destroyed her reputation, just like he tried to destroy mine. And now I have the proof.
The tears she'd been holding back finally fell, but her jaw set hard. This was no longer about farming. It was about settling a debt 2 decades overdue, and she knew exactly who would pay it first. That evening, Sarah called Earl and Dale to meet her in the old hay barn. She didn't tell them why, only that it couldn't wait.
What's this about, Sarah? You sounded like you'd seen a ghost.
I found something my mother hid 20 years ago. Something Charles Hartley never wanted anyone to see.
She spread the letters on a crate between them, her mother's warning and Charles's cold reply. The word hysterical stood out like a brand.
He threatened to kick her out of the co-op? All this time, we thought she just gave up.
The man's a snake. He called her hysterical when she was right all along.
I'll help you rebuild your soil, but I need something in return. You have to stand with me against him.
Earl and Dale exchanged a look that carried years of unspoken complicity. No more hiding behind the co-op's shadow.
We'll do it. The board meeting's tomorrow night. We'll bring the letter and make sure every farmer sees it.
As they left the barn, the first heavy drops of a summer storm began to fall. The weather was turning, and so was the county. The storm broke just before dawn. By the time Charles Hartley's truck skidded to a stop at the Whitfield gate, his face was haggard, his shirt soaked.
Sarah, I found a replacement, a new biological compound. It's not banned. Just endorse it, and the co-op will survive. I'll give you 20% of the profits.
You haven't learned anything, have you? Any new chemical is just the same poison with a different label. I won't put my name on it.
Then what do you want? I'll make you a full partner. Name your price.
Sarah looked at the man who had blacklisted her, mocked her mother, and now stood begging in the mud. She named the one thing he still valued.
Sell me your land, every acre, at my price. That's what I want.
My land. That's my father's legacy. You can't be serious.
Dead serious. You poison the land, you lose it. Consider it a down payment on 20 years of damage.
Charles stood speechless, then turned and climbed back into his truck. The tires spun in the mud, throwing clods of earth. The real storm hadn't even begun. The co-op board meeting was set for 7 o'clock, and Sarah Whitfield intended to be there with the letters. At 7 o'clock, the co-op hall was packed again. The same wooden walls, the same stale air. But this time, Sarah Whitfield sat near the front, the folded letters in her lap. Charles Hartley called the meeting to order, his voice tight, scanning the room for threats.
Before we start, there's something this board needs to see.
He passed the letters across the table. The room went quiet as Charles's face drained of color.
That's a forgery, a desperate lie from a woman who never understood modern farming.
It's your signature, Hartley. You threatened to cut off Eleanor if she didn't keep quiet. We all remember how she stopped coming to meetings.
A murmur rose from the farmers. Some had known Eleanor, Others had heard the rumors. Now the proof was in their hands.
Fine. I wrote it. She was a nuisance, and I did what was best for the co-op. You'd all have done the same.
A board member rose. Then you can't be our manager anymore. The vote was 9-1. Charles was out. Charles slammed his fist on the table, pushed through the crowd past Sarah, who didn't flinch. The door banged shut behind him. Silence. 3 days after the vote, Charles Hartley's truck appeared at the Whitfield gate one last time. His face was gray, his shoulders stooped.
The bank's calling my loan. I've got nothing left. You said to sell. Name the price.
Sarah didn't gloat. She simply named a figure. Fair, but far below what the land would have fetched 2 years ago. He flinched, then nodded. The paperwork was drawn up that afternoon in a sterile lawyer's office. The deed passed across the table like a sentencing document.
It's yours. The last acre my father owned. I hope you are satisfied.
This isn't about satisfaction. It's about restoration. Your father's land will finally be healed.
Charles didn't answer. He walked out, leaving his hat on the chair. The door clicked shut with the sound of a life closing. Driving past his old farmhouse an hour later, Sarah saw the sold sign already staked in the front yard. The house dark.
20 years of poison, and it ends with a sign in the dirt.
She tucked the deed into her mother's binder beside the letters. The circle was closing, but the work of rebuilding had only just begun. The following Saturday, Sarah stood before the co-op membership in the same hall where they had laughed at her 6 months earlier.
I'll help any farmer who wants to learn. But there are rules. No more chemicals. We rebuild our soil from the ground up.
We're in. Tell us where to start.
And so, out on the old Whitfield land, the first workshop began with compost and cover crop demonstrations.
This compost is the heart of it. Microbes, not poison.
She opened her seed stores, varieties her mother had saved for decades, and passed them out like offerings.
I haven't seen worms in my field for 5 years. Now they're back.
Not everyone was eager. Some farmers still muttered about risks, but the dead fields left no alternative.
It will take years to undo what Charles did, but we've started.
And as the summer stretched on, the first cover crops began to green the barren acres, promising a different kind of harvest. By late August, Sarah Whitfield's tomato field had become a legend you could see from the road. On one side, her heirloom vines sagged under fruit the size of softballs. On the other, the conventional fields stood stunted, yellow.
I've never seen a tomato that size. Not from a dirt field.
And the yield. She's pulling 3 times what we ever did. With no spray.
The first Farm Fresh truck arrived at dawn, its refrigerated trailer swallowing crate after crate of giant tomatoes. The weight slip read 7,000 pounds from only 2 acres. The county hadn't seen numbers like that in a generation. The old farmers who had laughed at the co-op meeting now stood along the fence in silence, arms uncrossed.
We were fools. She was right about everything.
Look, Mom. Your tomatoes are feeding a city.
The title promise wasn't a promise anymore. It was a fact, and every farmer in the county knew it. On the first Sunday after harvest, a banner reading, "Celebrating Our Soil," hung outside the co-op, and the hall filled again. Earl Benson rose from his seat, hat in hand, and cleared his throat. The room stilled.
I need to say something public. We laughed at Sarah Whitfield because we didn't understand what she was doing. She was trying to save our soil before the state had to. And we punished her for it. You were right, Sarah. We were fools. Your mother would be proud.
A murmur of agreement moved through the room. Some of the old farmers wiped their eyes.
I didn't do this to prove you wrong. I did it because my mother showed me another way. And now, we can all heal it together. That's what she always wanted.
One by one, farmers approached her, not with apologies, but with open hands. And in that room, the sound of laughter was replaced by the weight of gratitude. A week after the celebration, Charles Hartley sat in his old pickup on the town square, watching workers erect a new sign. The old co-op board had been pried off. The new one was painted in cheerful green. It read, Whitfield Organic Co-op in elegant script.
She took everything. The land, the co-op, even the name.
He sat, hands frozen on the wheel, as the sign was bolted into place. A few pedestrians walked by, but none looked at the truck. Charles turned the ignition and drove west, past his father's farmhouse, the sold sign still standing. Beyond the fence, the fields were green. Sarah's green, a soil alive with the worms he had laughed at. In the rear-view mirror, the new co-op sign shrank to nothing. Charles Hartley vanished from the county that day, and not a single person watched him go. The same evening Charles left, Sarah walked to the old oak at the edge of the farm where her mother was buried. She knelt and placed a single, perfect heirloom tomato on the headstone, its red skin glowing in the low light.
They heard you, Mama, finally.
The words hung in the quiet air. The tomato rested against the stone, bright against the gray.
The debt is paid. The soil is alive. Your granddaughter will farm it someday.
She stayed as the light faded, the farm behind her green and alive, proof that her mother's warnings had been true. A wind moved through the oak, rustling the leaves like a whispered answer. Sarah traced the letters of her mother's name with her thumb. The land remembered, and now everyone else did too. For the first time in 20 years, the Whitfield ground was whole again, and its keeper could rest. Early the next morning, before the heat, Sarah walked into her fields, with the dry letter folded in her palm.
Her hands held this same dirt. Every worm, every root. She knew it would come back.
She stopped at a rusted fire drum, struck a match, and held it to the corner of the letter. The paper ignited, curling into gray ash. The words her mother had written, and the answer that had mocked her, became smoke.
You don't need this anymore. Neither do I.
She watched until the last spark died, then scattered the ashes into the soil. The sun broke over the hills, and the fields seemed to exhale. Sarah looked out at the cover crop rolling toward the horizon, her mother's words growing in the dirt.
Everything she wrote is right here. This is her legacy.
She didn't need the letter anymore. The land was the letter, and it had been answered. Months later, the co-op building wore its new name like a promise kept. The green letters had faded slightly into the wood. Inside, the shelves held seeds and compost, not chemicals. Not chemicals. The old pesticide posters had been taken down and burned. From the hill where Charles Hartley's farmhouse once stood, the view was unbroken green. The soil that had been poisoned for 30 years was now thick with worms, its natural fertility returning. An aerial photographer captured the Whitfield farm for a state magazine, a mosaic of stripes and beneficial flowers. In the distance, a line of children from the local school walked the hedgerow, learning about ladybugs and soil health. Earl Benson, now co-op chair, had planted his entire acreage in cover crop for the winter. Dale McKittrick's grandchildren would inherit soil alive again. The valley had stopped dying, and it had started with one woman who refused to sign a piece of paper. From her porch, Sarah watched the evening light settle on the land, a quiet smile on her face. The work was never finished, but the fight was over. Sarah rose from the porch and walked into the field, the last light catching the dew on the tomato leaves. She picked a single fruit, heavy and warm, and held it in cupped hands, marveling at its weight. These were the hands that had been laughed out of the co-op hall, now feeding families in 3 states. She looked toward the county road, empty of Charles Hartley's truck, and felt no bitterness, only the quiet knowledge that her mother's voice, silenced for 2 decades, had finally been heard. A smile, small and satisfied, settled on her face as she turned to the camera. The tomato glowed in the golden hour, a perfect orb of renewal. Sometimes the quietest voice outlasts the loudest laughter. She held the pose, and the screen began to dim around her, the field fading last, fade to black.